Hello everyone, I'm Soojeong from the University of Sydney, and I'm presenting the paper called Embedding a VR Game Studio in a Sedentary Workplace: Use, Experience, and Exercise Benefits. This paper is co-authored with Phillip Gough and Judy. For many people, especially people in the sedentary jobs, achieving the recommended level of physical activity is a significant challenge. This is important as so many people have sedentary jobs. For example, like studies have shown that 50% of jobs in Australia are performed while seated. While traditional computer games are played seated, VR games that use head-mount displays can provide a valuable level of exercise, while research is showing that VR games can provide 8 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity from 10 minutes of total playtime. And also research shows that the player perceives a lower level of physical exertion than actually experience. So our work explores one way to tackle this challenge for people in a sedentary job that involve long period of seated computer work. These workers often feel like they don't have time to do 30 minutes of moderate activity during their workday. So we explored whether VR games are a useful way of introducing some physical activity into these workplaces. This was framed as two research questions. Firstly, what specific health benefits do participants gain from VR game studio sessions? And second, what motivates participants to use the VR game studio, and how do we observing them to using it? To set up the study, we made use a dedicated room, which included the HTC Vive system and gave available through the Steam VR, rather than a bespoke setup. So all our VR equipment and games are commercially available. We chose 5 VR games for the HTC Vive from the Steam VR. Several factors informed this. Firstly, we chose Hot Squad, Fruit Ninja, and Hollow Point based on previous research, which demonstrated that these games enabled people to gain relative high actual exertion compared with their perceived exertion. We then did an analysis of online discussion boards and recommendations for popular and fun games, and also included the Hollow Ball and Long Ball. To meet the goal for exercise, we selected a game with a range of movements during play, a range of intensity. For example, Hot Squat involves just squatting and make heavy use of the large lower body muscles and require high exertion. And then also we chosen 5 games so that participants had a choice, and to have a closed set of games so that we could make a comparison between them, and also the game were quick to play and learn. The procedure for our study was as following. In the first 3 weeks, we recruited participants, including performing the screening questions. This allowed us to make sure there were no other health issues likely to affect their ability to participate, and make sure that they were not likely to feel ill while they're playing the game. We also gave participants an activity tracker to record their incidental level of activity. And after this, we made the studio available to participants for 5 weeks. During this time, we collected various data. When participants enter the VR studio, researchers asked them to wear the polar heart rate monitor and sit down for 2 to 3 minutes to get their resting heart rate. Then we asked questionnaires on why they decided to come and what game they wanted to play for the day. Then while they're playing the game, we also collected their active heart rate. After the gameplay, we asked them to sit down again, and then we collect their recovery heart rate. We asked the participant perceived exertion using both scale, and also asked to rank enjoyment of the game on the scale of 1 to 7. At the end of the week 5, we asked for feedback from participants about the studio, and we received some comments about leaderboard so they can compete with others, and refreshments such as chocolate bars. Then we continue to make the VR Game Studio available for remaining 3 weeks with those improvements. We recruit 11 participants for the study. To be eligible, participants needed to have a sedentary job at workplace, and their workplace had to be in walking distance from the VR Game Studio. All the participants were generally healthy. 6 out of 11 participants active engaged in regular physical activity. The chart here shows the average amount of each level of physical activity: vigorous in orange, moderate in green, and light in blue. The game were played for different duration, which show in this chart. We can also see that the playtime for each game is dominated by moderate or physical level of activity. This is more clear when we compare the proportion of activity level for each game. Hollow Point and Hot Squat are clearly the most effective game to provide physical activity. And also, it's worth noting that all the games provided at least moderate activity for more than 60% of their playtime. Out of 11 participants, we can see that 6 of them, over half, gained more than 50% of their total physical activity from the VR on the day they came to the studio. This was particularly notable. Some of the participants were quite inactive, though they were generally healthy and averaged less than 6,000 steps daily. This led to a very low number of active minutes from their daily routine, which was greatly helped by the VR Game Studio. In addition, on the day they came to the studio, 4 of our participants made it over the 30 minutes per day threshold that is recommended by public health experts. This figure shows that the majority of participants had more than 30 minutes of physical activity when their VR and step active was combined on the day they came to the studio. While the VR studio made a significant contribution to many of our participants, we can also see that it is not getting all our participants over the 30 minutes threshold on the day they play the VR game. To help us understand this more, we also looked at the players' motivation to choose to play the VR games. Okay, to help us understand this more, we also look at the players' motivation to visit VR Game Studio. At each sessions, players were asked why they wanted to come to the game studio, and then we clustered this using a affinity diagram and came up with 4 main reasons: work affective factors, physical activity, fun to play, and game competition. So out of all this, the game affective factor was the most common answer, with 48% of all responses relating to the work environment. These include things like participants feeling like it would help them to focus at work, or just simply wanted to take a break from the work. This was the only factor that all participants had at least once. The next most common was to get physical activity at 20% of all responses, whether at the start or end of the day, or to gain some exercise. The third motivation we found was to just having fun, particularly long day after teaching. This accounted for 18% of our responses. And finally, friendly competition between other participants or by themselves was motivation for some of our participants with 11 of all responses. These games were each ranked for their enjoyment by the participants. Longboard was the standout as the most popular game, particularly for four of our participants who clocked up a combined 11 hours over the course of the study. This enjoyable game also provided an opportunity to get exercise. There were some limitations to our study, which may translate to real-world implementations. We had a single VR game studio. This also meant we had to limit the number of participants. Also, we used multiple devices to track physical activity. There were a couple of reasons for this. Mainly, the high-quality tracker used in the sessions was not appropriate to be worn all day by participants over 8 weeks. So an activity tracker was provided like Pebble Watch, but the watch doesn't recognize the VR games as a physical activity, so as it is programmed to record the steps. And finally, we also note that heart rate may increase by about 10 to 20 beats as effect of excitement of the game rather than physical exercise, which is topic for the future research. We have a couple of takeaway points. Firstly, participants got physical activity while having fun and taking a break from their work. There is one avenue for people in sedentary jobs to get physical activity. 6 participants only met the 30-minute recommendation on day they played VR games. Other insight about the studio, we found that the most common reasons using the lab were because the work affective factor like taking a break during the work. We found that participants were competing against themselves, and this social dimension was an encouragement to play. To sum up, our study demonstrated that playing games were enough motivate for our participants to come at least once a week, take a break from the work, play a fun game, and also get some exercise. Thank you for listening.